What if that thing standing between you and your healing wasn't a lack of willpower? What if it wasn't that you hadn't tried hard enough or talked about it enough or wanted it badly enough? What if the barrier was simply that your brain, in its effort to protect you, had made it biologically impossible to feel safe enough to heal? Today, we're going to talk about MDMA therapy, what it is, why people choose it, and what is actually happening in your brain and your body when you experience it. Because this isn't about getting high, this is about getting free. So let's start from the beginning. When you were born, your brain was wide open. When you were a baby, you absorbed everything around you, from language to faces, emotion, touch, all of it, and it was effortless. And that's because a baby's brain is in a state of maximum neuroplasticity. It's flexible, it's moldable, it's changeable, and it's incredibly ready to learn. Neuroplasticity is simply your brain's ability to form new connections, rewire existing ones, and adapt to new experiences. And every single one of us is born with a tremendous capacity for it. But as we grow, the brain starts doing something necessary and smart. It begins building habits. Habits are automatic patterns and shortcuts that let us move through daily life without having to consciously think through every little single thing we do. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you drive to work. You don't think through each step along the way. Your brain just handles it. And that efficiency is a gift. But here's where it gets complicated. Because the brain doesn't only build habits that are safe and neutral, it also builds habits around pain. So when you experience something threatening, overwhelming, or traumatic, especially as a child, your brain locks that experience away and builds an automatic response system around that. A hair trigger alarm system designed to protect you from ever feeling that way again. And every time something reminds your brain of that original pain, even something small, that alarm fires. It's fast, it's automatic, and it's overwhelming. Your heart races, your chest tightens, and you shut down. You lash out or run away or go completely numb. Not because you choose to, but because your brain built a super highway towards that response, and it travels on that road in a fraction of a second. And that's not weakness. That's not a character flaw. That's your brain doing the only job it ever learned to do, which was keep you alive. But at some point, that protection actually becomes a prison. So here's what makes trauma so difficult to treat through traditional therapy alone. Talking about trauma requires your brain to feel safe enough to go near it. But for many people, the very act of approaching that pain triggers the same alarm system that was built to avoid it. So you sit in a therapy session and you try to go there, and your nervous system floods with fear and shame and overwhelm, and your brain shuts the door before you can even get close. And that's not a failure of therapy, and it's absolutely not a failure of you. It's a physiologic response. Your brain is doing exactly what it was wired to do since a child. So the question is, what if we could temporarily turn down that alarm? What if we could create a window where the brain feels safe enough to actually approach the wound, to examine it, and then begin to heal it? And that is precisely what MDMA does. MDMA stands for 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, and it's a compound that produces a very specific and remarkable set of effects in the brain. When you take MDMA, it triggers a significant release of three key brain chemicals: serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. Serotonin is your brain's mood stabilizer. It creates feelings of emotional warmth and safety and well-being. Dopamine drives motivation, reward, and a sense of aliveness. And oxytocin is often called the bonding chemical. It's the same compound that floods the system or a mother's brain when she holds her newborn. It creates this deep feeling of trust and connection and love. And now here's where it gets especially powerful. At the same time that MDMA is flooding your brain with these chemicals of safety and connection, it's also doing something very targeted to your fear response. It significantly reduces activity in the amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for detecting threat and triggering fear. So think about what that means for a moment. The alarm system quiets down. The wall around the wound lowers. And suddenly, for the first time, many people are able to actually approach their most painful memories and experiences without being overtaken by them. Not because the pain isn't real, but because the brain finally feels safe enough to look at it. People describe it as being able to revisit difficult experiences with the compassion of a loving observer rather than the panic of someone reliving it. They can see what happened, they can feel it, process it, and even begin to integrate it in a way that simply was not accessible before. So I want to use an analogy that I think makes this really, really clear. Picture a big sledding hill right after a perfect snowfall. The hill is beautiful and completely smooth and open to possibilities. The first few times you go out and sled down, you carve your own path. But over time, as those paths get used over and over again, they get packed down in deep grooves. And eventually, no matter where you try to steer, your sled gets pulled down those worn tracks. The hill starts deciding for you where you're going to go. Well, those grooves in the snow are your automatic responses, your conditional reactions. Those are the patterns that feel impossible to change no matter how hard you try. Now imagine someone bumps into you on that hill and forces your sled into a direction that you never chose. Well, that's trauma. Sudden, uncontrolled, and carving one of the deepest grooves on the hill. So what does MDMA therapy do for you? It brings a fresh snowfall. It creates a window of neuroplasticity where those old grooves lose their grip and where the hill opens back up and where new pathways suddenly become possible. And what makes MDMA's snowfall so unique is the quality of that snow. It's warm, it's safe, and it's deeply relational. The openness that it creates isn't just neurologic, it's emotional. It allows you to approach your own story with a level of compassion and courage that most people have never even been able to access. There are several psychedelics and compounds being studied for therapeutic use right now. Ketamine, psilocybin, DMT, and others all open neuroplasticity in very different and unique ways. MDMA stands apart for a few specific reasons. First of all, MDMA does not produce hallucinations or disorienting perceptual shifts associated with other psychedelics. You remain grounded, present, and lucid throughout the entire experience. This makes it particularly accessible for people who feel anxious about losing control. Secondly, MDMA is uniquely relational. Unlike some other therapeutic compounds, MDMA strongly enhances the therapeutic alliance, meaning the trust and safety between a patient and their therapist. The work that happens in an MDMA session is deeply interpersonal, and that relationship becomes a vehicle for healing in its own right. Third, MDMA has shown remarkable results specifically for PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Clinical trials led by MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, have shown that after just 2 or 3 MDMA-assisted therapy sessions, a significant majority of participants no longer met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. And this is amazing. These are people who have been living with treatment-resistant PTSD for an average of over a decade in just 2 or 3 sessions of MDMA. And this is not a small thing. This is actually extraordinary. And fourth, unlike stimulants or addictive substances, MDMA used in a therapeutic context with proper spacing and intention and setting does not create dependency. It's a tool, and a very powerful one at that. So here's the most important thing I want you to remember. MDMA, it opens the door, but you are the one that must walk through that door. The window of neuroplasticity and emotional openness that MDMA creates does not last forever. What you do during and after that window, the processing, the therapy, the reflection, the integration, that is where the real transformation happens. Without integration, that snow settles. The old grooves begin to reform. But with integration, you're literally building new neural pathways, new defaults, a nervous system that no longer has to carry the full weight of what happened to you. The wound doesn't disappear, but it does lose its grip. And in its place, something new begins to grow. And this is why MDMA therapy is not just a treatment. For many people, it's the first time that they have ever felt safe enough to heal. And from that safety, real and lasting transformation becomes possible. You have probably tried to heal, maybe many, many times, and maybe you've wondered why it hasn't fully worked. It wasn't because you weren't trying hard enough. It was because your brain had built walls specifically designed to keep you from going there. And without the right key, those walls don't come down through willpower alone. Your brain isn't broken, it's protected. And that protection once made sense. But you deserve more than a life lived inside those walls. MDMA therapy done with intention, with proper clinical support, and with the commitment to integration is one of the most powerful keys science has ever discovered for unlocking that healing. You are not your trauma. You are not the grooves that were carved into your hill without your permission. And the most important thing of all is it is never, ever too late for a fresh snowfall.